Bruce Reynolds and his gang had successfully raided a mail train and fled with over £2.5 million. Whilst police forces from 3 counties were left on the back foot, the men were counting their hoards of cash. But the officers were closing in. The robbers' hideout had been blown and local bobbies were now on their trail.
I'd seen a lot of sacks down in the cellar, and if those sacks contain the money that was stolen from the train, I started to think to myself, well, perhaps they haven't gone. Perhaps they're out amongst those trees, amongst those outbuildings, watching me.
But the rest of the gang had left, leaving John and his colleague to scour the farm for much-needed clues.
The thing that struck us first and most forcibly was the house itself, because every one of the windows in that house was covered over. We had a walk round the yard, and then of course we saw the vehicles. A couple of Land Rovers and a big open-backed Austin lorry, an old army lorry. But the thing that really triggered it was when I spotted that the 2 Land Rovers both bore the same registration number. And I knew that weren't right.
The identical number plates had been a ploy to confuse people. But it wasn't just the Land Rovers the robbers had to worry about. Their hideout had been blown. They'd made their escape just in the nick of time. As for Bruce, by now he was well away from the scene of the crime and plotting his next move.
The heat was on everybody, and no one wanted to be caught with large sums of money. So I had someone who was going to look after my share, and he'd said to me, it's going underground, you won't be able to touch it for a while, so take what you need and give me the rest. And there's an old thieves saying is that you can trust any man with your money, your life and your wife, but never all 3 together.
For the rest of the gang, trust was wearing thin. The farm that was now crawling with police was meant to have been destroyed. The solicitor involved had paid an acquaintance to set light to the building and destroy any evidence. Despite being paid thousands of pounds, he never did the job. Their secret hideout was now a treasure trove of clues.
One of their number was actually tasked with that job, and I suspect that in their parlance, cleaning it up would have meant setting light to it. And it would have burned out, and by the time a fire brigade had been summoned and got down there, it would have been a sea of hot ashes, taking with it all the evidence, all the clues, all the forensics.
No end of fingerprints there, yeah. You had plates, which were used, ketchup, there was the Pipkin cans of beer, where they'd been staying there, living it up. I think they tried to clear it all up, but obviously they left quite a lot. You've got the transport problem of the lorries, the Land Rovers, all in garages. So they each had to be taken out, fingerprinted and examined for forensic. Paint eventually was found on the pedals of one. You had all the bonfires that had been where they'd tried to get rid of stuff. It was a filthy job, really. I think it was one of the most successful cases that they've had, fingerprint-wise, in the country, really.
Investigators discovered more and more clues. As for the robbers, panic started to set in, and they quickly found themselves in a game of hide-and-seek with the police. Even Bruce was in their sights.
The desperate hours came in because I was picking a paper up and reading that, just like a game of dominoes, there was a new name that had been arrested the day before. I could almost taste the porridge that you get in prison. I thought that capture looked like being inevitable. There was a knock on the door. Angela, my wife then, she opened it, and there was a policeman there. They said, is there anyone else here? And she said, well, no. And with that, I think I'd just got a pair of shorts on or something. I stood up, minus the shorts, completely nude, and Angela then picked up the cue immediately and said, well, I'm sorry, but my husband's away and this is a friend of mine. I covered up my best bits, and they sort of didn't want to look and apologised profusely and left. You know, they got back to the station, said we just caught someone, the husband's away and having an affair. Some said, as a joke, it wasn't him, was it? Because the photo had appeared then in the Police Gazette. And of course, crestfallen, their faces dropped. This became known as the French farce incident.
You've been had, son.
Bruce decided he couldn't take any more chances. It was time for drastic action. Especially now the police had pulled in their first suspect, Roger Caudry, and were fast closing in on the others.
Right, team. Give me an update.
I was just debating whether I should really go missing. I was drinking a bottle of vodka a day, you know, just to sort of stay abreast of it. I wasn't going out at all. I had my best friend who retired from being an active criminal, and he started arranging plans for me to move out of the country. We had connections with South Africa and we had connections with Mexico. In Mexico, who would be connected with the train robbery? Plus, I'd read about Mexico. I liked the idea of it. I thought, this is the place for me.
So while the other gang members were gradually all being brought to justice, Bruce was forging a new life.
By this time, of course, I'd acquired a passport in the name of Keith Clement Miller. Well, my pal arranged for someone we knew who was a pilot who would fly me out from Elstree to Belgium, where I could pick up a plane for Mexico.
Bruce Reynolds was a very active criminal. He was big time. He was in a league right at the top. And I'm sure his name must have come into the frame relatively early. Although they knew that they wanted to talk to him, they wanted to interview him, Mr. Reynolds wasn't there to be talked to.
Most of the men in the gang thought the robbery was going to be their passport to a new life. But the reality was very different. Once they had the cold, hard cash, they simply didn't know what to do with it.
Most of the other members of the gang panicked and themselves got rid of all the money. Over £100,000 was found abandoned in a wood near Dorking. Another load was found abandoned in a telephone box near the Old Kent Road in southeast London. So, you know, people were now getting the wind up and they didn't want to be caught with all that evidence on their hands.
Months down the line, most of the gang had been arrested. Ronnie Biggs had been caught, but later escaped. The only robbers still at large were Buster Edwards, Jimmy White, and Bruce, who had settled nicely into his new life abroad.
We've got a penthouse. With it came a maid, and I deemed it was okay for my wife and my son to come over. For us, it was absolutely marvellous. We were very, very happy there. I mean, why shouldn't we be? You know, we was leading the sort of life I dreamed about, a Hemingway existence. And we was going to the bullfights every Sunday, drinking champagne as always.
Bruce lived a high life for years, travelling the world and living off the spoils of his crimes. Other gang members were less fortunate. By 1966, both Buster Edwards and Jimmy White had been arrested. All the main men were now inside, with the exception of Bruce Reynolds, who was still managing to evade the long arm of the law. But officers were adamant they would catch the man behind the great train robbery.
Chief Superintendent Tommy Butler had a most distinguished service and was about to retire, but no, he decided that he wanted to carry on and see if he could bring this to a satisfactory conclusion. The conclusion, of course, being the arrest of Bruce Reynolds.
Pulling off a job like this.
Word was coming back to Scotland Yard that he had been seen in such and such a place, was believed to be using such and such a name, but either the country where he was supposed to be lodged wasn't cooperative or didn't have an extradition treaty with the UK, or that they'd moved on by the time they got over there. And so Bruce Reynolds remained at liberty for 5 years.
By now, though, Bruce was hungry for another job. His time on the run had been a whirlwind, and he was getting restless.